Ryomen Sukuna is known in Jujutsu Kaisen for being the king of curses and a natural disaster. Sukuna is one who doesn't care for anyone but himself most of the time, and only keeps people around for amusement or some other value they have for him. But Sukuna also holds the title of being the strongest in the series, a title known for its loneliness. With this title, Sukuna has been slowly enlightening other strong opponents and freeing them from their burdens. And in this video, I wanted to go over this concept and Sukuna's role as the guide for the strong. But first, I'd like to say that if you enjoy this type of content, make sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel, since I make Jujutsu Kaisen content just like this, and it'll tell me to make more in the future. To go into chronological order, the first time he enlightens somebody who's considered strong in the series is in chapter 8. Now, while this character is not strong in hindsight, the finger bearer in chapter 8 was strong for the time and was a fearsome opponent for the first years. At first, he doesn't try to kill this opponent because he has some value for him and he wants him to fight Megami and eventually kill him, but the finger bearer turns on him and he doesn't actually want to follow his lead. So when this cursed spirit throws cursed energy at Sukuna accidentally regenerates Yuji's hand and completely blows the attack off. He then proceeds to completely blitz this cursed spirit, throw it into the ground, and step on it. When the cursed spirit tries to retaliate by grabbing him and throwing him, he cuts the spirit's arm off and doesn't even break a sweat. When we come back to the fight, the cursed spirit has been cut limb from limb and put into a wall. When the cursed spirit is proud of itself since it regenerated and came out of the wall, Sukuna says, "You and this brat don't have the slightest idea of what a curse can do, and how about I teach you true Jujutsu sorcery," and uses his domain expansion, giving us our first glimpse at an open barrier domain and the true power that Sukuna holds. Even though Sukuna knew that it wasn't necessary to use his domain expansion to beat this curse, he still did it anyway, because Sukuna is someone who values the art of Jujutsu. The way I interpret it is that since Yuji and the cursed spirit were both just spewing out cursed energy based attacks without really using the art of it, and the cursed spirit specifically felt very proud of itself, Sukuna just wanted to show that they really aren't doing anything impressive at all. And there are many levels to this, killing the cursed spirit with overwhelming strength that wasn't even necessary. The next time something similar to this happens is in Yuji and Nanami's fight with Mahito. Now, if you guys haven't picked up in the series, Mahito is someone who's supposed to parallel Sukuna in his ideals. They are very similar when it comes to mindset and ideology, where they both only do things that cater to themselves, with Mahito even saying that even if you lose your way or are inconsistent, we're undoubtedly living according to our desires. That is what we curses are, which is basically the same thing Sukuna says after he finishes off Kashimo. And Mahito also has the same bloodlust as Sukuna, or need to get stronger. Mahito's main goal in the series is to kill his mortal enemies and find the true form of his soul. This bloodlust is something that many of the strong characters in the series don't have, like a Yuta, when Ryu points out that he's too soft, and to become the strongest you must become a calamity that disregards all else. When Mahito comes close to death and uses domain expansion to trap Nanami, Yuji breaks into the domain expansion, making Mahito forcibly touch Sukuna's soul. And keep in mind, prior to this, Mahito had already touched Sukuna's soul, but Sukuna let him off easy. But since this was Mahito's second offense, Sukuna doesn't let him off so easy and gives him a deadly wound. Similar to the last time that Mahito encountered death and gained domain expansion, I think that from this taste of death, Mahito learned how to use his curse technique more effectively even after using domain expansion. If you don't know, after using domain expansions, your curse technique is supposed to be almost impossible to use. But Mahito is one of the only people that in the series are able to use his domain expansion and curse technique back to back multiple times. He does it right here when he manipulates his soul to become way bigger. He also uses it to trick Mechamaru right after using his domain, and Mechamaru hits him with a symbol domain. And he does it once again when fighting Yuji and Todo, making a polymorphic soul isomer right after using a domain. This theory may be a little bit of a stretch, but it would make sense given Sukuna's context narratively and being a parallel to Mahito. And if Sukuna indirectly teaches Mahito a skill like this, it would be one of the most valuable assets that Mahito has in his possession, since almost no one can do it. Next up is his infamous fight with Jogo. Jogo is someone in the Disaster Curses group with Mahito who has almost opposite ideals as Mahito. Even though they fight for the same goal of making curses reign supreme over humans, Jogo comes at it a completely different way and is much more selfless. Jogo says himself that he doesn't even care if he's not the one standing in the end, but as long as curses reign supreme, his goal has been complete. While Mahito doesn't do it for other people like Jogo, he only does it for himself. And when Jogo takes these ideals and faces off against Sukuna, he is showing why those at the top cannot think the same way he does. After reviving Sukuna and Sukuna allowing him one request as a token of his gratitude, Sukuna denies Jogo's request of using Itadori's friends as leverage to make a binding vow with him, and tells him that as a token of his appreciation, if he can land one hit on Sukuna, he'll do as the cursed spirits ask of him. And this fight doesn't start so well for Jogo, as when we cut back to it, they're both in the air but Jogo seems unconscious, and Sukuna is saying, "Is that all you got, cursed spirit?" But Jogo wakes up and attempts to throw a fireball at Sukuna and gets his arms chopped off and sent back flying down to the ground. Sukuna then pummels him through an entire building and says the moonlight's illumination makes it easier to see how pathetic you are. They continue fighting and Jogo uses a maximum meteor, which is his second strongest attack after his domain expansion. But due to his slow speed, Sukuna is able to dodge it pretty easily, but he does admit that if it hit him, it probably would do some damage. Sukuna then asks Jogo why he didn't use his domain, to which Jogo replies that he knows he'd lose in a battle of domains. Sukuna then says, is it because of what happened with Satoru Gojo, and tells him that was spoken like a true loser. But since things are getting interesting, Sukuna decides to use his own specialty to fight Jogo, and uses his true curse technique, opening the black box and conjuring flames. And when they're preparing for their final face-off, Jogo is dead before we can even see the attack land. Reunited with the fallen disaster curses Dagon and Hanami in the afterlife, but Sukuna is someone who can invade this afterlife space. He listens in on their conversations and finds out that Jogo wants to become a true human. He then calls this goal foolish, saying humans flocking together, curses flocking together, comparing themselves to those around him, leads to weakness and stunts their growth. And he tells Jogo that he should have burned everything he desired to a cinder, to reach the heights of Satoru Gojo, and not to worry about his future or his identity. Very similar to the ideals that we see from Ryu. He then kind of confided in Jogo and tells him that it was fun while it lasted, and that throughout humans, sorcerers, and cursed spirits, he's not bad compared to those he's fought over the last 1,000 years, and ends it off by telling Jogo to stand proud because he's strong. Jogo begins crying and asks Sukuna what this feeling is, to which Sukuna replies, "Don't ask me, I don't know what it is either." Another example of Sukuna showing pity even when it's not necessary at all. He didn't have to show Jogo his true technique, and he didn't have to tell him that he was strong, or tell him how he could have reached the heights of Jutsu sorcery. What it seems like to me is that Sukuna did this to give him a peaceful send-off, and give him a conclusion to his life, showing him how different their abilities are even in the skill that Jogo has the most pride in, that being his fire. Sukuna, even though being evil, is very peaceful when it comes to death. When fighting those he considers strong, he doesn't disrespect them and sends them off peacefully. If you think about it, he literally could have said anything to Jogo in these final moments. He could have told him he was terrible, he could have told him that he wasn't even close to Sukuna's level, but rather than any of that or comparing him to himself, Sukuna made him cry tears of joy in his final moments. I will be going over the Mahoraga fight, but I'll be doing it later since it's kind of a special case. But moving on, this is going to be a pretty quick section. It's about him killing Ryu. Ryu is a character who is very strong in his era. He tells Yuta that in his first life he was a very moderate eater. He fought worthy opponents and met a good woman, so he doesn't particularly have any regrets, but he can't stand this vague thirst, and no one understands why he can't get any satisfaction. Ryu was always smoking because the cigarettes have a sweet taste, but throughout his life, he's never truly had dessert. Now whenever he says sweet or dessert in the series, it's usually in context to strength or a good fight for him. So what he's saying is, even though he fought strong opponents, they weren't enough to satisfy him, so he still has a thirst for battle in order to get the satisfaction that he seeked in this first life. And eventually, when Ryu has a very good fight with Yuta, right before their final clash, Yuta's able to see the look of over 400 years of thirst and hunger. And at the end of his fight with Yuta, he's able to declare that he was indeed his final dessert, gaining satisfaction in his second life, even giving Yuta thanks and telling him that his stomach is full. But after Sukuna gained Megami's body and did the bath to gain more cursed energy, his presence was felt by both Ryu and Uro, to which Ryu says that's way too sweet. And even though he felt that Sukuna was much too strong, he still goes to see him. Just due to Sukuna's sheer presence, when he meets him, Ryu is already sweating, and Sukuna attempts to kill Ryu, but Ryu is stronger than he initially thought and is able to survive this attack. Sukuna then says he's sorry for underestimating him, and the next time he'll fight for real. But then Ryu attempts to back up and use a granite blast, but before he can even fully activate it, Sukuna completely blitzes him and cuts his head into 3 pieces. Now this may be a bit of a stretch, but Sukuna may have been what Ryu was truly searching for, someone with an overwhelming intensity that he could feel from almost anywhere in the world. Since even though he felt satisfied with fighting Yuta, he still went to go see Sukuna after seeing he was way too sweet. But there's not much to say about this, and we can move on to the next one. And the next person that we have to go over is going to be Yorozu. Out of everyone we've been over, Yorozu is probably the one that knows Sukuna the best and understands him the best. After seeing Sukuna, she immediately realizes that he's very lonely and goes in to hug him and tell him that he's not truly alone. She is immediately attacked by Ryomen, who tells her to step back, and Yorozu simply responds, telling him that from now on, she'll be the one standing in Yorome's place, and that she won't let Sukuna look so lonely. But after she says this, she realizes that Sukuna had already hit her with his technique. We then cut back to the present, where she says she wants his solitude all for herself, and it belongs to no one but her, because she is the one who will kill Sukuna. So from what we know, Yorozu is the one basically trying to release Sukuna from his burdens, because she understands that the strength and the title of the strongest comes with the burden of being alone. And Yorozu probably has the best ability possible to truly kill somebody. She has the curse technique of construction just like Mai Zenin, but she's much better with it, being able to create a perfect sphere. Since the sphere has no contact area, it generates an infinite amount of pressure, so anything it touches will basically be erased from existence. And she uses her domain expansion to turn her true sphere into a sure hit attack, making it almost guaranteed death for Sukuna. But Mahoraga is already adapted to this, and Sukuna uses Mahoraga to destroy the domain from outside. And after killing Yorozu, Sukuna says that an energy inefficient curse technique like hers always ends up the same. Whatever she constructs, the substance appropriates the liquid, metal, or armor she was using, and he's simply already adapted to this previously in the fight. Yorozu then responds saying, "What? You know all about me," and she's so happy. Sukuna doesn't seem very amused by this, and it doesn't seem as much intentional as the previous ones, but he does kind of lead her to a peaceful death. Yorozu gets confirmation that Sukuna understands her to some degree, and she also got confirmation previously in the fight that Sukuna may know about what true love is. And with her goal basically being to show Sukuna what true love really is, she's kind of done, so she dies leaving him one gift that we see later. Now we can move on to the most controversial one on this list for sure, and that is the death of Satoru Gojo, and how Sukuna led him. After Sukuna kills Gojo, we get to see what he's doing in the afterlife, and we see he's talking to Geto. He tells Geto that he always told his students never to die alone, and he's hoping that this is just his imagination. And when Geto asks him how was the King of Curses, he says that he was crazy strong, and Sukuna didn't even go all out. And after admitting that he doesn't even know if he could beat him if he didn't have Megami's 10 shadows, he says that he'd feel sorry for Sukuna. The reason being that Gojo can empathize with the magnitude of his sheer solitude more than anyone else. He says that he loves everyone and doesn't feel lonely now, but somewhere along the way, there was a line that he drew, not as a human, but as a living creature, going on to say that you can make a flower bloom and you can admire it, but you can't tell that flower, "I want you to understand me." He says that he used everything and gave it his all in his fight against Sukuna, and he wanted to convey everything to him and wanted Sukuna to understand him. But due to infinity, Sukuna wasn't able to give it his all, and for that, Gojo feels sorry for him. This basically sums up how Sukuna freed Gojo, and how Gojo was lonely before this, and he didn't feel like he connected with any living creature on the planet. This even goes back to Gojo's goal in the entire series, that being to create a strong and intelligent group of people, and not leaving anyone alone. This goal of his came from his own selfishness, and need to be understood by other people. This is why I disagree with a lot of people when they say that this chapter kind of retconned the character of Gojo, making him to be more selfish, when he's always been pretty selfish if you understand his true goals. But Sukuna killing him frees him of the title of the strongest, and simply leaves him as Gojo Satoru, a name that people can understand. And the fight ends with Sukuna saying that Gojo was magnificent, and he shall never forget him as long as he lives. But something that isn't really portrayed in the translations is the fact that in the Japanese, Sukuna is basically using a praise term that usually is referencing a person of high status, such as a king, giving Gojo the praise that he deserves, and freeing him of the title of the strongest. Next up is the most recent death in the series, that being Kashimo. Kashimo is similar to Ryu, where he only wants to fight strong opponents, and he never truly got satisfaction in his first life. He did get some satisfaction though when he's fighting Akari, but Akari never really forced him to use his curse technique. So he continued to search for Sukuna, and eventually was able to fight him. Before they fight, he asked Sukuna if he was born the strongest or if he became that way, to which Sukuna responds that he has no idea. Kashimo then says that if he's never known weakness, how can he interact with others, or even show kindness, and that Kashimo himself could not do it, and that others to him were just brittle clods of earth. As Sukuna must strength be lonely, and rather strong curse to wander in search of limitless power. Sukuna simply responds by calling him greedy, and says that Gojo was the same, but he'll tell Kashimo the answer. The ideals that Kashimo have are very similar to Gojo's, but they're very much more radical. Since while Gojo and Kashimo both do believe there's a line separating them from every other life on the planet, Gojo doesn't believe that everyone is just brittle clods of earth. He truly has feelings for people. He just believes that those feelings simply can't be reciprocated back towards himself. He wastes no time using his curse technique and actually overpowers Sukuna since he was weakened from fighting Gojo. But when Sukuna transforms into his Theonera state, Kashimo realizes that this form is perfection for a sorcerer, and even calls Sukuna beautiful. After being hit by Sukuna, Kashimo throws an attack at him, and Sukuna responds using his own attack, which is enhanced by chance. But Kashimo is able to survive this by only losing an arm. But Sukuna continues overpowering him, and uses a final attack that kills Kashimo. And just like Jogo, Kashimo meets Sukuna in the afterlife, or what seems to be the afterlife. Sukuna tells Kashimo that many fierce fighters must have challenged him with all their strength and spiritual might, but they never cursed him. They wanted Kashimo's recognition. so they could know their worth, but he butchered them, all while wondering how to treat others with care. And Sukuna says that if that isn't loving kindness, then what is? He says that others love them for their strength, and they respond with that love. But even though people loves him, solitude still troubles Kashimo, and that's why Sukuna called him greedy. Sukuna continues on saying that love is worthless, and that he doesn't need anyone else to satisfy him. The thing that separates Sukuna from Gojo and Kashimo is the fact that they value love in a different perspective and light. Kashimo and Gojo both feel the need to be wanted and loved, and even though people have these feelings for them, they feel the need to also give the same feeling back. But since people can't stay on the same level as them and comprehend their true strength or feelings, no one can reciprocate these feelings. This is why Gojo feels so strongly for Geto, since when they were both the strongest, they could understand each other perfectly. But as soon as Geto turned to the other side, Gojo immediately felt the loneliness creeping up on him, which is why he wanted to create a group which he wouldn't be lonely. But Sukuna doesn't mind this loneliness. He doesn't mind entertaining himself. He does whatever he wants, and he tells Kashimo that it never gets old. So Sukuna being able to kill anything in his path and burn anything that he wants to, giving him the ultimate freedom in life, is what separates him from the other people who claim to be the strongest, and is what allowed him to become the true strongest in Jujutsu Kaisen, and what gives him the authority to lead the other strong people to their deaths in a peaceful manner. But that's all I have for today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel, since it'll tell me to make more Jujutsu Kaisen content like this in the future. But yeah, goodbye.